Well, hi everyone. Here we are, and we're in the middle of our tracks. Super excited to be here with Ron Petty. I can't wait to hear his presentation. I believe he's going to be talking about the generation beta, the great balance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. What do you got? What's your sneak peek, real quick?
Yeah. So we have to care about the kids, right? So
All
that's
right.
that's what this is hopefully gearing us towards.
All right. Well, I'm super excited about that. Well, without much ado, let's just get you into it. Why don't you
All
give
right,
a
great.
quick bio and let's see how things are.
All
I
right. Thank you
can't
very
wait to
much.
see you afterwards. Bye for now.
All right. All right, everyone. Hello. My name is Ron Petty. I work for a company called RXM, where we specialize on cloud native and AI technologies and training. My non-day job, I'm the chair of the local chapters of the Association for Computing Machinery and the Internet Society. So just not only during my day job, but also in the evening, very interested in all things tech and its impact on society. So let me share presentation. All right. Okay, Zoom is telling me it looks like it's shared. Okay, so thanks again to Shannon, Mark, and Chip for allowing this opportunity. I really do appreciate it. Can never have enough time talking about these things. All right, so the name of my talk is Generation Beta and AI, the Great Balance. QR code is to this presentation. So what is this going to be about? So again, just from my own background, I'm interested in pretty much anything tech and shiny. But again, what's often missed is its kind of relation to the world at large, right? Not everybody is a programmer, not everybody is a PhD in some particular area. And so this talk is geared towards learning kind of about some trends that have happened, about some organizations that exist, about some problems we may want to try to surmount, all with the hopes of handing off this new world full of AI to the next generation, which we'll get into. Okay, so this handoff, there's many ways to slice and dice the game of life and ultimately who the players are. We being the current player, so in my case, I believe I am Generation X, kind of on the tail end of that. And there's been a few generations since Generation Beta. And so how I'm approaching this is we are kind of taking a tech-focused view here, a technology-focused view, starting off with the need for tech. So the innovation is a cycle. This is talking about society's need for new tools and new techniques, and then ultimately those things filling back into society and making things happen. So who controls that? How does it affect the next generation, right? They have to learn how to use these things. They have to learn how to manage these things. Then we'll kind of talk about some large scale instances of these things. So the electrification of the world, the internet, the compression of knowledge, things like this. And then we'll pivot into kind of a more practical, we're talking about generation beta. What does that even mean? Think about groups of society, society at large, the world at large, and the many different people and things operating in this world. How do they hand off this technology to the next generation, and how should we prepare and how should they prepare? Okay, so that's the idea. So number one here, innovation is a cycle. So again, kind of mentioned this already. So society has a demand for solutions that leads to tinkerers to build things. We've already heard this in a few different talks here at the Artificial Unintelligence Conference. Ultimately, those, we'll just say academic kind of tinkered builds will get into an industry in some form that will then grow, right, through just usage, and again, leading to economic modeling. And again, society will take advantage of that. They will, certain technologies will prosper, others will wither. And so ultimately, this cycle goes on and on and on. And with every year, we see studies of, reaching back in time Just today or yesterday was the new earliest mummification discovered in China, right? So some use of technology to preserve, whatever it was, tens of thousands of years ago, right? Further beyond what we knew before. And so when do technologies show up? How long do they take to kind of go through this process, right? From a need to a desire to solve your own problems and then kind of scale that up from there and then formalize it, right? Regulations and things like that. So again, this kind of perpetual cycle. Okay, so just as there's just a few slides just to kind of give us the idea of when things happen, the volume of things. This isn't necessarily the only things out there, of course. So here we're just, this is one of many ways to kind of picture energy. So what we see here is think about society, think about the generations. Here it goes back to 1800. Back then we're talking about digging coal out of the ground by hand, right? And then ultimately, water floods into those coal mines. And so you can only do so much bucket brigading to get the water out. And so ultimately we, come around to steam engines, right? Then gas engines and or coal engines and natural gas engines, electrified generators and engines. And ultimately, through a lot of things, just the desire for energy, right? We know we can use it to do other things. We build all these technologies and then ultimately keep consuming. And now we have kind of Javin's paradox here unfolding before our very eyes, right? So this isn't a comment on what's good technology or bad technology, but this particular technology, in this case, electricity and all the things around that, has grown over time. Now, to do this, why did it, according to this, like why was there such an uptake in like 1940? Well, you could probably guess in that era, right? We had World War II. And so there was a large push from the first naval ships to use a certain style engine, right? A steam kind of based engine. And not long after World War II, we ended up with nuclear engines, right? Nuclear submarines. So ultimately, it didn't take long for us to compress the amount of waste that we had into very powerful systems. So this notion of a compression of things really shows, once we can wrangle it, we can control it. And so ultimately, a lot of things came together here through these years. Precision tooling, how did you make precise tools where you can repeat things? Just knowledge of things, like what does it mean to even have electricity and magnetism, right? All these things started to kind of come together through this period of 1800 through the early 1900s. And ultimately, the generations of people who lived in those times, it left the lab and it went to the regular kind of blue collar work. They still had to learn how to efficiently use these things. And so ultimately, energy was a real good example of this, and there's lots written on this. Now, this is a horrible looking pixelated image by design. So moving on from energy is just another example of complexity and a lot of systems being built. And again, you can think of the generations of people that move through here. We'll speak more on generation beta specifically in a little bit. What we see here is this is based off of a document describing the creation of and management of the internet by Vint Cerf and others. And so really what we just see here is a variety of groups across the top and organizations that kind of fed into each other that ultimately created the internet as we know it, along with a variety of just kind of points of interest along the way, including transitioning to TCP/IP, things like the Internet Society, which I'm the local chair for. A lot of these groups here, again, try to learn and improve and maintain the internet. And this requires knowledge transfer, right? AI is not the only game in town, right? Managing something as large as the internet, as you can just see from this one slide, requires many people, many organizations over long periods of time. And that didn't just happen, right? You have to mentor that next generation. You have to do that handoff. And it's not really captured in this slide how that was done, but through a lot of mechanisms, including just standardized education. Go to college, learn networking, right? Now we have all this free stuff online. There's pros and cons to these methods of learning, and one is not necessarily better than the other for any one person. So again, there's a lot of value in seeing what's out there, and just the reminder that it takes a village to do these things. Here's another, just, again, on the internet. This is more of a transition to show us there's a lot of people, right? It's one thing to have the internet. Yes, it grew in organizations, it grew in systems, but there's a lot of people using the internet. This is showing us there's billions of people using the internet, right? And so again, who manages this infrastructure, and who is going to get trained to be the next shepherds of this global system, and now interplanetary system, right? There's, what's not mentioned here is there's the interplanetary society as well. And again, there will be developing concerns there and here on the ground to go with it. Okay, so what this is trying to show, there's a lot of things on here, but really what this is meaning to show is kind of a collision of some of these large scale systems. And again, the generations of people that came with it and through it. And so what this is really just trying to show us is, if you notice around 1900 through 1950, a lot of things start to kind of come together. A lot of innovation starts to happen. And what we see here is, one, again, is electricity, right? Electricity allows us to build things because we can control tools. Well, the tools got better because of precise engineering. Another piece that's kind of underrated but becomes more important in the world of AI is knowledge, right? So the compression of knowledge has happened, right? It used to be one person with one printing press, and even earlier than that, we had clay tablets. Now you can have a SD card that has a terabyte, right? And so ultimately, having all that we'll call factual knowledge is great, but you have to go further, right? The further is what I would call like process, right? We have to do something with this knowledge. And to me, that is where I would say AI and agentic stuff is leading us to, is the ability to take this collection of data and then go, it's not just that, it's one more step further and starting to add process on it. Now, of course, we're not perfect, right? We don't have pure reasoning, right? AGI just yet, but we have more than just looking up a fact. Right now, you could get lucky, and if you're learning a process, you could say, go to Google, teach me this process. And if somebody wrote the blog, that's great. Now we have that same information, including process information, in a little bit easier form to maybe find it and pivot from it and try new things out and experiment. And again, this is what we're going to leave these next generations, right? Or these tools potentially, again, it could change, but as of today, a lot of these tools to automate processes are going to be built on these banks of information that we have been building. Great examples, of course, were Wikipedia, the Internet Archive, dark libraries, right? There's all these different sets of pots of data, but now we need that layer on top of it. We'll just call it the agentic layer to do something. Okay, so what happens when you have all this kind of innovation over time? So there's many time periods, many ways to think about this, but one that's been pretty well studied, and I just kind of find interesting, we can kind of pretend, is it going to happen now with AI, and will it happen leading into the next generation? So hopefully I can say this right. Neurasthenia is basically, as it says here, mechanical weakness of the nerves. This is basically people freaking out because technology is going too fast. So this is shown up in different points in time. Now, these two books we see here actually describe near the same time period, a little bit more focused on the left, The Strange Death of Liberal England, which is a book talking about the Liberal Party and how it's kind of bifurcated itself by dealing with things that maybe it shouldn't have and ultimately collapsing, and people's reaction to that, right? So again, a big event led to societal change, didn't happen overnight. And then you have the book on the right where the Vertigo years talks about it each year in that period of time, kind of what was the innovations, changing of the world from the old regime to the new regime, basically stating that what we see in the modern world as far as like how the world operates was largely kind of set in motion during this period of time. A lot of people may think things happened earlier or even after World War II. But the point here is a lot of the technology, a lot of the ways of thinking the ability to do more with technology happened in this period of time, and we just kind of expanded upon it after 1914. So again, very kind of good slice views of the world and how it affected society. And again, they came out with terms for this. People would actually go to the sanitarium and check themselves in because they just couldn't deal with the stress of things. What you don't see here are other examples that were even earlier. So like the period of the steam engine, right? People couldn't believe that you could go, too fast because you'll fly apart, right? Or that you couldn't move on a smooth surface, you'll just stay in place. So again, until the tinkerers proved it, right? Which is its own incredible history. Here you hear about races where they would take custom built steam engines and race them to just prove that it could actually work, right? So again, it took this disruption, this period of people living through it to appreciate it and continue it on. It didn't always work though, right? Other technologies fell on the wayside that maybe shouldn't. One of them, for example, that's often mentioned is nuclear. Now we have AI. Now is our time and our choice. Do we continue on with AI or do we slow it down? Well, you know which camp I'm on by the end of this. So as a society, these new technologies, in this case, AI is what I want us to think about, has been described as a dispersion, right? And this dispersion can take decades, right? It could take more than one generation to disperse a technology based on some of the literature we may read. Some people believe it happens a little sooner, some take longer. In the case of energy, the number that's oft quoted is around 50 years for a technology to kind of be built and then be kind of pervasive in the world. So is that going to happen again with AI, right? So if generation beta is born 2 years from now, starting in a couple of years from now, the years are still being defined. If it's 2 years from now, what have we decided? Are we still going to keep pushing forward with this technology? Or are we going to hold it back or something in between, most likely? So in dispersion, what this is just trying to hint at us as a society, what we can think about is, says here, values and vision, societies value rationalism, problem solving, right? So there was problems to solve. In this case, World War II led to a lot of investment in computers and nuclear energy and space. We have benefited from those, right? But without World War II, would those things have happened? Or at least would they have happened as fast, right? Trust and legitimacy. So local solutions versus global solutions, right? Again, until you hit the right market, solve a real problem, again, tinkering may be just for you. It may not be for the next person. So how do we know that this technology is going to go on? Now, AI is everywhere, right? OpenAI has got hundreds of millions of users with ChatGPT. Clearly, it's solving some kind of need. So more than likely, it will be trusted, even though there's a lot of talk, incorrect talk about safety and trust. It seems that society has already accepted it, right? Practicing in education, what does your society value, right? Do we value the building of this technology, the consumption of this technology? Those are things that we have to consider. Institutional backings, right? Some of these things to go to that next level, right? We saw that circle earlier. Can you go from tinkering out of the academic lab to an industrial, worldly scale for these things? Another point of this dispersion is the narrative. Can we tell these stories that will inspire people and keep them going, right? We had, Jules Verne in the 1800s. We had other nonfiction and fiction come through the days. Who's going to tell the story about AI now, right? We hear both sides, good and bad. Ultimately, that has an impact and ultimately has a lengthened history. And we need to, only time will tell which of these are going to win and change our minds for the long term. Okay, and the last one, ethics and norms. All this comes together, right? As a society, what do we are willing to accept, right? It's individuals, but individuals come as a group and ultimately as a society, and we all have impacts when we do these things. All right, so towards those generational gaps, there are going to be different concerns for different groups. So in the case of generation beta, the basic statement is they will have only lived in a world where there is AI, right? Again, years have wiggle rooms. This is just showing you the most recent generation. So basically, Gen Z is the parents largely of what we would call Generation Beta. And even Gen Z would, one would argue, and millennials have grown up in a world where there's always been the internet, right? And smartphones. And so it probably pays us to pay attention. What was the impact on them? While I would love to live 100 years, personally, I am very glad I lived in Generation X because I got to see the transition, right? I got to see the transition from no internet to internet, right? Will these other things have as much impact as something like that? Probably, right? Going to the moon, a much smaller singular event from the outside was a big deal, right? We went from not doing something to something incredible that we could probably do again, right? Where will AI kind of fit on that and have an impact on Generation Beta? And of course, it has an impact on all these prior generations, right? For an older generation, we want to have the technology to support us, right? So even though you may not trust a self-driving car, you might want the robot to bring you your medicine, right? Or pick you up. So all these things come together. Okay. Another dimension to all this is who are you supporting? So Generation Beta lives with AI. As we can see here, on the right, we see three different time frames. We see 2000, we see the year 2100, and in the middle, 2050, of which Generation Beta will be of their kind of prime working age. So you can see, assuming they're 25 to 30 range, think of the society they will have to support. So in today, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, very bottom heavy. In the future, much more similar bands in age. And again, each age will have a certain needs, right? And Generation Beta will have learned and lived with AI. And will they be able to support the generation that comes below them and the ones ahead of them, right? Robots, things like that. Okay. So again, these groups, Generation Beta, if we think of them as individuals, how might we approach it? So one way is to go through traditional psychoanalysis. So, Freud, here we have Erikson. This is actually three members of the Erikson family. So Erik Erikson, his wife Joan, and their son Kai, all did kind of interesting work that kind of goes into this line of thought of how can we benefit from AI and prepare ourselves for AI and the handoff to these next generations. So in the theory of personality, there's a dichotomy. There's a good and a bad, right? So you see through the age. So what Erikson was telling us is through the ages up to 70 years old, we have hope and will and purpose, right? And agency ourselves. We can either do something or despair and not do something, right? So again, this has been well studied, but not in the context of robots, right? So could we actually take this very human study and see what it means when things do things for you, like robots and software and things like this? Joan added a number 9 to the top 8, and it's basically do it all in reverse. So what happens when you hit 90 years old? She actually wrote number 9 when she was 93 years old. And basically she said, hey, I'm 93. I'm no longer wise. I no longer can do things. I am alone. I cannot, I don't have the agency that I used to have. So her take was like, hey, all these things are great going forward, but what happens in that last few years when it goes backwards, right? So again, if we think of these things in context of Generation Beta, how they're going to grow up, how could we go through each of these and map how these systems may assist them? To the right, we have.
Hi, Ron. You have a few more minutes for your session. You'll be able to go as long as you want to, but I wanted to ask a quick question.
Yeah,
like
please.
so neat, actually. I really love what you're doing here. What kind of got you thinking about generational development in AI?
Simple. I have a kid and I need her to be smarter than me so she can take care of me when I'm old.
Totally a good point. Well, I
Very
just
simple.
wanted to, ask that question and let you go on. You'll be able to continue on. And if you've got questions, definitely feel free to answer with folks here. And if you need anything, let us know.
Great.
I'm
Thanks,
gonna
Jen.
let you go. Bye for now.
Thanks. Yeah. So again, with Erikson's family work here, a different kind of take is on the right with Kai, their son. Basically, it was on community trauma. So what happens when large scale, generally speaking, bad things happen? What happens to society? And that's what he studied and wrote some papers on, right? So it mentions just some of the topical things here, right? Trauma affects the whole community, not just individuals, right? The fabric of life is disrupted, right? COVID was probably a great example in our lifetimes, right, of this. um, Current volatility, aside. um, Secondary trauma is there, right? It's one thing to have the incident, it's all the things that follow, right? Lawsuits, the reorganization of society, right? We're seeing that now, right? So I'm not saying that this is 100% reflective of reality. I think it largely reflects some of it, but it's probably worth taking a peek at if you're not familiar with these things, right? So again, the world is changing right before our eyes, right? There's a healing process, right? Rebuilding trust, rituals, communal bonds, right? Not just AI. Things have been changing, right? And this is why we talk, often, I'm in tech, so I think about electricity and the internet and things like that. But there's other things. People drink less, right? So what does that mean? Well, that means you go to the bar less. Maybe. I mean, I'm not young anymore, so I don't know. But presumably, how we interact with people is different, and it's not that it's bad or worse or better, right? It's just different. And so again, if you're going to hand off society to people who do it differently, what does that even mean? Right? You have to take stock of what's going on and meet them in the middle. And then when you're looking really far out, like Generation Beta, I mean, they're not even born yet. What should we do for them? And that's really the point of what I'm trying to inspire you to think about. All right, just a couple more slides here and we'll wrap this up. Just another kind of viewpoint of all this is Max Weber's book, and other books like it. So The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Again, this is one of many views of the world. It's just one I picked to be interesting. Here they kind of say that the Protestant ethic kind of led to capitalism, right? Others say Catholicism led to it, right? Because of Italy and merchants and all that. Marxism, right? Colonial expansion and world trade, right? Again, lots of different takes on all this. There's the very kind of practical science did it, right? By inventing things and getting those tools and techniques figured out. It actually is what really enabled the ability to build things and sell things, right? So again, there's lots of ways to look at the world, and AI is not just in one little lane. That's what makes it so interesting. It's affecting lots of things, whether you believe it's going to ever get to AGI or not. Even just a small 1% improvement is lifting the boats of many. And it's turbulent seas, right? You're losing jobs and this and that, right? There's a lot of things we have to deal with. But even if it's just that small percent, it's already clearly making a huge impact. And so we should probably consider these things, these past trends in society, and see if there's any guidance we can get here. Okay, last section, managing technology through programs and processes. This is just to show you, again, people have tried to control, systems and careers and improve them. And of course, some people did it to get money and power. But again, I'm trying to take the more practical help society view here. So again, this is just a table. We see it's actually kind of two ongoing columns. What we see here is a comparison, a transition of technologies. Horse-drawn carriages to steam engines, right? 10 years. Vaudeville to cinema, says 40 years. It's more or less right. Radio to video, 30 years to get kind of real popular. And again, you see these transitions. And again, as engineers, you can think, how was that done? Right? There was technology that was developed. Society had to accept it. We had to probably regulate it, shared wave EMF, for wireless, land, right? Eminent domain, right? To make railroads, all these things. Where does AI fit into this, right? A big part of it, of course, is the knowledge gathering, right? So who does that? Who owns it? Should it be shared? Groups have been doing this work, right? A lot of great individual work, but usually to keep it going as a society, we have guilds and professional societies and advocacy groups and standards bodies. All of these things have been built over time to help shepherd knowledge in an ongoing way, right? Maybe a lot of these groups don't necessarily think of generations. They think of individuals moving through careers. Um, maybe it's time to think about generations more, because they come as a group, right? And they have certain expectations and and the like. This is just a lot of stuff here. You can download the slides later and see. This is just, again, showing the kinds of groups right here on the left, right? We got civil society, what, just living in the world. We vote. We go to the grocery store. What do we do in this arena, right? There's our careers, the professional societies. There's the things that we want to make better, nonprofits, right? There's lots of different ways to group, lots of groups to join. And again, if AI is now embedded in all of these, what does that mean? Right? These groups already share things, right? So again, there's things we can look towards. All these groups are probably using electricity. All these groups are, doing commerce. All these groups are doing something in common already. So how can we balance all of that, right? And that's the kind of things I'm looking towards. This is the last slide. This is about education. So on that handoff to generation beta, we probably need to maybe change how we do education. And this is probably what I want to leave you with the most. So turns out it's not so easy to find out how everyone learns around the world, much less look for trends, because a lot of it's just not seemingly easily searchable on the internet. There's probably books all around, you got to dig around. But it looks like Common Core, based on my little research here, was probably the biggest change in the United States regarding education, right? We standardized in the mid 2000s or 2010 around Common Core. Most people probably don't even know what Common Core is, because you either went to school before it became a thing or after, and it's just a thing and you don't even look into it. So it's a little hard to know, like, what is it really doing? I'm not here to explain it, but I will say this: they made Common Core and they didn't know anything about AI, right? They didn't know anything about jumping between professions in a much shorter time period, because something like AI may make that possible, right? How can you be a better generalist, right? That's how my take on this. So tools are getting better, right? You used to have to be a very specialist to use a particular set of tools. AI is a little different. AI is a natural language interface at the moment, in the case of LLMs, that allows anyone to ask it anything. That is very different than being really good with a microscope, right? Microscopes can do lots of things for lots of reasons, but that's still nothing in size comparison to what something like an LLM provides. So again, if we teach people how to use a microscope, we should probably teach them what it means to have all the world's knowledge on a hard drive, right? There's probably something that we could do better there. And that's really what this is trying to show us. We've tried to retool and relearn and guide. It's time now to add AI into that mix. And with that, I will end with a pithy quote. You may live in interesting times. This was purportedly actually an ancient Chinese curse. A different take on it is better to be a dog in times of tranquility than a human in times of chaos. That may be so, but I enjoy this new world we're building. There's going to be ups and downs, but I definitely think there's going to be more ups. And that is my talk. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Now let me see if there's questions. Don't see any questions. Okay, I'm sure to volunteer. And finally, some other quotes to leave you with. Prepare for the future. All right. See if there's no questions. Maybe I'll go back to the slide with my LinkedIn. If anybody would like to reach it to me, there I am. Love tech. And if you need any help getting involved with any of these groups or talk about AI, happy to do so. And thank you.